No, like here, pass control.
Okay.
And that gives the control over. And now it's,
Okay.
and by the way, it resets it after every slide deck.
Yeah, Mithen's going to drive this. So we have 2 o'clock, and it's time for the first ONSEN workgroup session at IETF 126. My name's Ian Farrer, and my co-chair there is Mithen Tyvalville, who is going to be attending remotely from, I think, the West Coast.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Excited to start working with you all.
So we'll start, as ever, with the note well. Please take a minute to have a look over it. And can you please make sure that you're logged in via Meet Echo to show your attendance in the room? There's a QR code on the mic there, or you can do it through the website on the agenda. Some links there. And we've got a 2-hour slot today, and we've got a hell of a lot to get through. There's a very, very packed agenda. So we're going to have to be pretty tight on the timings. And yeah, if we have to ask you to move on, if you're not finished, then please bear with us. We'll take things to the list, but we have got a lot that we need to get through to today. Queuing, and if you want to participate, then please use Meet Echo to get into the queue. I think you all know the drill for that, but yeah, that's how it works. Okay. As ever, we've had a number of contributions, and I think we're doing quite well at the moment, but please, yeah, remember the mailing list is the place where work and decisions actually get made. We don't have any drafts for review yet, but this will come up. Yeah, we will ask for your participation and your support in that area. And yeah, we're a way away from document shepherds at this stage, but yeah, one day. Okay. I think we've covered work group reviews, document reviews. So let us start with why we are here today. The new ONSEN work group, it's been a long time coming, I think, but here we finally are. Operationalization. I can't even say the word, I'm afraid. That's what we call it, ONSEN for short. But yeah, we're focused on abstracted modeling and service modeling, over the top kind of stuff, layered abstractions. How do we get here? There's a lot of work that's been going on for many, many years now that many of you will have been involved with, certainly you'll have read, into service network models and abstracted models. These are things that we're trying to do so that we can manage things at scale, intent-based provisioning, and how we can speed up provisioning in really complex and diverse environments. The problem is the take-up has not been what it might have we might have hoped for, and the question behind that then got raised. Well, why? What is the problem here? Back at the end of 2024, the IAB ran the NEMOPS workshop, which was meant to review how really we'd progressed in the last 20 years. We now have NetConf and Yang. And a bunch of additional models, I mean hundreds of models literally, that have been authored around here, but maybe we haven't got as far as implementing these things as we hoped we would have been. So this is why we're here. This is what ONSEN is going to try and find out and resolve, to make it possible to use these things to understand how we can actually implement stuff and get stuff into service. So with that said, let us get started. A little view of the estate that we have inherited here. It's by no means the full list, but what we tried to break out here was the key models that we're focused on. So we've got the service models, L2, L3. There's also some attachment service stuff that lives up there. We've got the network models, which are focused around the common VPN model, but also the L2 and L3 VPN model. the whole attachment circuits architecture. I think there's 4 RFCs that define those with associated models. And then down here, some associated work that is also under our remit. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but this is kind of where we're focusing. And I think the left pane is where we'll be first looking at. So how do we get started on all this? Clearly, we have a problem, or we have a number of problems. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting in the room today. We wouldn't have a work group to talk about these things. And there's a number of things that are being raised via NEMOPS, via various different efforts to gather things together. And so the first thing that we need to do is get a clear view of what the problems are that we believe are in the remit of the work group, what things we need to address. Where we have inconsistencies, when we have emissions and all of those kind of things. I think also we will have to address problems that are not just this model doesn't work properly or, that bit's missing. Around, deploying these things, there's organizational things, there's technical things, there's educational elements, there's so many other things that we need to consider here around saying, okay, how do you actually, help people to get stuff into service? And on that basis, we may have to apply a bit more creativity to how we go about addressing these problems. And, it may not be just a case of saying, here's another architectural RFC. We then take that information and we need to look at what the foundations that underpin all of these models, because it's just extending and adding more containers and leaves onto shaky foundations is not going to help anyone. A lot of the problems that we'll be talking about are maybe a bit more fundamental than just we don't have enough nodes on the trees. So that's will be the next step that we have to look at, is to say, okay, how do we get our foundations right so that we have the right building blocks to go forward with. Okay, let's get started with our agenda. So we've given a rather meaty slot to the problem statement, because obviously this is the first and most important thing that we need to look at. Samir is going to be running that for us. What we then have done is kind of tried to create the different drafts that have already been submitted. Given the timing, given this is the first meeting, there's a bunch of work that people have already submitted, and we've tried to sort of arrange this in order of what the relevance is to the problems that we already know about, give the authors the chance to describe what they've got in there, and use that as a basis for discussion about how we proceed with each of those pieces of work. So we have, I think, a total of, was it 7? Yeah, 7 slots, and with any luck, we should have a couple of minutes left at the end for an open mic. Can I hand over to Samir for the first presentation then, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you share the slides, or should I share it?
I think.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to. Yeah, should have it. Yeah, should say that.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samir Bargi. I'm presenting this draft on behalf of my co-authors, but I also want to remember that this is nothing new. This is something that I'm just recollecting all the information and discussions that we have on the past on the mailing list, and I just try to put everything together. So I encourage you also to give all the feedback and all the comments, or all the possible comments that you have to the current draft. The session goals that we have for today is initially present each of the problems that we have documented so far in the draft. Ideally, we are going to discuss each problem. We have a limited time frame, so the idea is to reduce the discussions to a specific amount of time that I will share later. But the idea is to cover if it is in a scope, if it's correctly framed, if you detect that something is missing, we are open here to, well, we are open to hear any of your comments and feedback. And we have also at the end a final make option. So if something is missing or any of the 8 problems that we have documented in the draft do not cover your expectations, we are also open, well, some time to discuss it. The scope reminder, this document do not propose any solution or protocol or data model. The goal is to agree on what are the problems that the ONSEN charter is going to solve and try to put it here as an actionable items. And finally, I want to make said special thanks to all the charter proposal, all the mailing list discussions, and all the contributors to the draft. I'm just someone that put everything together, but this work is the result of all the discussions that we have in the past. So what is ONSEN? I believe that our chairs already present that, but the goal is to make IETF service and network abstractions easier to implement and use. The idea is to improve how network automation increase operational efficiency and interoperability between vendors and in different network scenarios. And the core activities is basically document use cases, scope, and priorities. This is the purpose of this draft, updating some of the young data models or key young data models that we saw in the previous slides, and defining abstraction and service layers for OSS and BSS integration and increase interoperability. It's clear the ONSEN do not define new protocol or extend external frameworks. So the background of this draft, and you can see it on the document, is the RFC 8969. So basically here we define what is a service model, a network model, and a device model, which is the scope of each of these layers, and what is the lifecycle management. So what we expect or how we define service instantiation, monitoring, modification, decommissioning, and closed loop automation. So the whole set of problems that we have defined are in the scope of this draft, and this is the background and the building block for all the discussions that we are going to have in the upcoming set of problems. The list of problems and operational areas that we have discussed are basically 8. This is the way the draft is structured. So I will list it here, but we will enter into the details during the rest of the presentation. So I will not read it one by one because we will have time for that. But this is the list, and you can see it also on the draft. So for each of the problems, the idea is to resolve these kind of questions. If this problem, if the scope of ONSEN it's correctly framed, it's something missing, can you provide an evidence or an experience that help us to improve the description or find a proper solution for this problem? For each of the areas, we only have 4 minutes for the discussion. So we will have the mic open for that period of time. So we are pleased to hear you. So if you have an opinion or a comment, please feel free to comment. And but also not the last thing, we will after the session we will have in the mailing list a consensus set of questions just to gather more feedback in case the time is not enough for the discussions that we will have today. So I will enter to the first problem. So the first problem is the lack of a guidance on how to work with fragmented operational life cycles. So the draft document that operational workflows, in this case, instantiation, monitoring, modification, decommissioning, are handled consistently across protocols, vendor, or tools. The models do not share lifecycle semantics, and configuration management remains separated from telemetry. As a working group, ONSEN can work toward a consistent lifecycle definition and native lifecycle attributes in the abstractions. I would like to know if this is captured correctly, if there is anything missing from the draft at this point, or that the working group should also address. The way of reading this, each of these statements is the problem description, and within the brackets you see the section of the draft that is presented. Well, where is present on the. So now we have the mic open if you have any comment regarding this problem one.
So does anyone have any comments about whether this is something we believe that we should be tackling in the work group in either direction?
All right, Mahesh, I think what you're asking is those three questions I think you put up front, which is this problem statement in scope of ONSEN? And I believe there were two more questions. I think that's the question you're asking. And if that's the question you're asking, I believe as a contributor, I believe this is in scope, right? So the only question is there anything that we probably should not consider? I mean, otherwise, I think I agree with the problem statement, and I agree that we should be considering it.
Great.
Joe Clark, Cisco. This, to me, I mean, this sounds like a problem. It is a problem. It sounds like the mapping exercise that way back in Madrid when we did the side meeting, people said was probably untenable. But maybe I'm misreading this, but it seems like you're saying we have these vendor-specific APIs or vendor-specific models, and operators want a more consistent way of working with a heterogeneous mix of stuff, and that would maybe naturally require a mapping. And is that something that can be done? And if it is, are there people willing to invest time and effort into doing it? Or are there other lower hanging fruit or other things that people are willing to work on now that might lead to what seems like a very big thing to solve? And that should be where the priorities lie.
So without jumping to solutions, I envisage this as actually being more of a guidance problem than a mapping problem. But yeah, both could be valid. Who knows?
Chris Lambrechts in Twine, one of the authors on the draft. I do think that guidance is necessary here. I do not necessarily believe that in this room or in the sort of documentation process, it is possible to provide a definitive mapping from one to the other. I'd rather say that we have work to do in terms of showing how mappings could be done. I'm a proponent here of referencing open source implementations that have done the mapping. That doesn't mean it is the authoritative mapping. It's just, here's a few people who have done it in various ways for their networks or their sample networks that they're willing to open source or show. And that's a more realistic way of doing it for me.
Okay. Wim, we'll have to cut the line off that, but go ahead, Wim.
I have more a clarification question because I see two questions here. One is the mapping, like that Chris said. The other thing is I feel that the second piece is the life cycle. How I'm reading it is that the current models don't have attributes related to life cycle management that help guide with the mapping. So that I see two things in here. One is additional attributes to basically express the desire for the life cycle. And the second is how do you then map it? So I see that as two different things potentially.
So you think that the formulation of the problem in this may need some work?
I just wanted to clarify how I interpret it. That's how I interpret it, but
Fair comment.
I want to share that interpretation with the audience and with the group here. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know.
Okay, so we'll take this and we can discuss it further on the list. Samir, do you want to move on?
Yep. So thank you all for your comments. The second problem is inconsistent models at the same abstraction layer. So we have documented that models at the service layer, in this case, for example, L2SM or L3SM or network slice service model, evolve independently, leading to inconsistent parameters or sometimes incompatible service representation and an unspecified relationship between them. So ONSEN is well positioned to bring this into the alignment, but we want to make sure we are capturing the full scope of inconsistencies here. So we will welcome any gaps or points that you consider we could include. But so far, these are the three that we have documented.
Any comments for problem 2? No? Okay. We'll take that onto the list and move on to problem 3.
Perfect. Problem 3 is misalignment between abstraction layer. It's similar to the previous one, but different. The draft describes the absence of a defined mapping between service and network models. Parameters do not correspond across layers. Vendors' behaviors aren't captured in the service intents, and concepts like cost or performance are defined differently in different layers. So this is precisely the kind of cross-layer alignment that ONSEN working group can solve. So if you have any comment here, it's also welcome.
Italo Busi. I think that some misalignment is inherent on the fact that you are providing different abstraction layers. So there is, from the service model to the network model, you have a controller that has to translate your service into a specific network configuration. From the network model to the device model, you have another controller translated to the device configuration. So it cannot be a strict mapping. Something, I fully agree that something may be the same, but something may be inherent differently. So it's good to, maybe this is I think it makes sense to have a similar structure if the things has to be the same across the abstraction layer, but abstraction may be different on some aspects.
Benoit Claes. So actually, I want to mention something similar to Italo. Yes, everything that you're telling me so far are problems. Now, I know that you're in problem statement, not in the solution, but actually, since there are different layers and different abstraction, they serve a purpose. So if we say that's a problem, then we're going to have an LXNM at the LXSM with a one-to-one mapping. And actually, it's not really the goal. So I could say yes to all of these problems. The point is that you have to think a little bit, is this practical? Is this something that we want to solve, even if this is a problem? So a couple of key parameters, keys in the Yang model, fine, but how far do we go?
So, yeah, Chair Hatoff, to echo what Benoit says, I think what we see here is that it's a lack of clarity about how the things are meant to be used. Or that's what my feeling of where this comment comes from, is that we need to get an understanding of where can you map, where should you map, and where should you not map? What is the purpose of having this separation between the layers, and how should you look to bridge that gap? What are the considerations that you have for doing that? And I think that's that's something that we can tackle about this. But yeah, if you're going to do one-to-one mappings, then where's the abstraction?
Thank you. All right, Mahesh. So kind of building up on what Benoit was talking about, the fact that we're going to have to deal with different sets of models at the device level, whether it is vendor specific or it's yet another body that has developed. That's a given. I don't think so we will be able to change that. So when I read this, in my mind, I'm thinking, as Bruno said, that maybe there is an abstraction layer that has to come between the service/network layer and the device layer. Is that a fair statement? Do we agree? I'm trying to get to what Bruno was saying. What is the specific problem we're trying to solve?
I mean, I think what you're saying could well be one of the outputs from here. But one of the things I think that has, is that there isn't a common understanding of how these are meant to interwork with each other, what the purpose of layers are, and why some degree of separation is, maybe a desirable thing. But yes, this is certainly stuff that I think needs to be addressed. Okay, we'll need to cut the line after Rashad.
Yeah, so Rashad, so on 432, just to add to what Bruno and Mahesh were saying, like it seems to me like there's stuff in the network layer which is public in terms of API that the services need to be able to program for the services, and there's stuff which are private, which is like the underlay or whatever, as an example. So I think we have to distinguish a little bit between there's cases where you don't want to have a mapping, and there's cases where, yes, it's not might not be a one-to-one thing, but it's case by case, I think.
Yeah, both could happen. Yeah. Okay, problem 4, please, Samir.
Perfect. So problem 4 is the limited observability and feedback within the LXNM and the LXSM. So what we have documented here is that existing abstractions are primarily configuration oriented. There is a limited standardized support for alarms or state reporting or the lifecycle feedback. So operators in this case cannot easily validate whether the service intent is being maintained over the time or what is the actual status of the service in the network. So here ONSEN can define what the operational status should like in these models. And we will like to confirm this is the shared priority and whether these are the specific feedback mechanisms that the draft should, or well, the drafts that we have on the pipeline should call out more explicitly.
Any comments on problem 4? Okay, we'll take that one to the list then. And on to problem 5, please.
Yeah, we are in a good cadence. We stop in one problem, then we progress to. This is good. Problem 5 is OSS BSS interface and API interoperability within the YANG model application and devices. So the draft captures that the gap between YANG-based models and the northbound interfaces the operators actually use, in particular the TMF 640 or TMF 641. A gap exists. Today, every operator builds their own adaptation layer, and APIs are generated from similar YANG models are still different or diverse. So ONSEN can provide the guideline, the guidance and alignment for what it's currently missing. So I know this is one of the most relevant points that we have had in the discussion on the past, and we want to make sure we have the documented it properly and the full scope is in within the draft.
Any comments on this one?
Mahesh, I'm a little confused by the last statement above, I guess the block. APIs from similar YANG models differing in service semantics. Are we, if you're talking about the interface between OSS BSS layer and whatever comes below it, I thought what this working group was going to do was try to define that interface. And, and therefore, APIs from similar YANG models, plural, It's confusing to me.
Can I ask the authors of this if do they know where this one came from, where that particular requirement or problem statement came from? Okay.
Chris Lamberts, one of the authors. I do not, but we will come back on this and refine. It is also
the progeny.
It is a confusing statement to me as well, and so I'll happily look into it.
Okay.
Itarbuzi, I think also this is something more in the scope of the implementation of the network controller. If I look at the example you said before, you have a layer, you have this controller that is configuring the network with layer 2, layer 3 NM based on the intent coming from the customer through layer 2, layer 3 SM. And we have a situation where instead of using layer 2, layer 3 SM, some OSS implement another interface. So we have two competing standards for the same interface, which unfortunately happens multiple times. And the only thing that can do is that your controller needs to implement two MBI standards because you need to talk with the two different type of clients. But then what you have to do is you have to basically create understand the intent and understand how to configure the layer 2, layer 3 NM toward the network. I think this, we can provide guidelines, but I think here is merely an implementation issue for the network controller that provides layer 2, layer 3 SM as well as TMF aligned open APIs on its MBI.
A question to the room. Are there other operators in here that recognize this gap or the TMF to Yang modeled OSS domain that is described here? Is this something that is commonly observed or? Yes. Okay. So it sounds like it would be a useful thing to tackle then for you. Yeah. Okay.
Chris, in response to Italo, I hope that the presentation on my draft a little bit later will clarify why this, in my point of view, is a good draft to have here.
Dan BHP, which was about 5 months ago an operator working on this. The trick is depends on, it is a problem depending on who's trying to implement the models. If you're coming from the old OSS system, you think TMF is going to go all the way down to the optical link. If you're a network operator, you're a network team, you're thinking that Yang is going to go up to the portal of the user. And the logic is somebody could decide that TMF 641 is actually a product is called flying packets or flying frames. And that's the purpose. You have to have an intent that tells you this is going to be an L2 VPN service model or L3 VPN service model.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Hi. I reckon that there is a problem, but I do not know if we have the strength enough to really solve it. And on the one hand, we are working here with data models. TMF is not working with the same kind of data models that they have. They work on APIs for service activation.
Sure.
So
yeah,
maybe ideally what we thought some way back is okay, how can we use the data models that we define in IETF inside the APIs of TMF, and then this way, okay, we don't, let's say, compete each other and we are complementary. That would be the ideal, but I don't know if we have the strength enough to do that.
That's what I think we'll try to do, but yeah, we'll see. We'll need to cut the line after Nils, please.
Julien Meric, Orange. So I will say similar things like Oscar before. This is clearly an issue and maybe a large problem to solve. So we need to find a reasonable scope on address, maybe based on the priority level, what we can achieve and progress step by step. But it's an actual problem behind.
Yeah, thanks.
So Niels Warnke, Deutsche Telekom. I'll make it very brief. Exactly on this topic, we had a side meeting a couple of years ago in Prague, I believe. There were a lot of operators in the room who acknowledged this to be a key issue, and I believe that the founding of this working group is still a late result of this side meeting, I believe so, or I'd like to believe so. So I definitely hope that we will find a way to approach this.
Thank you. Can you move on to problem 6, please, Samir?
Perfect. Problem 6 is also section 4.6 in our draft. So here is lack of architectural guidance. So the draft notes that the absence of any document explaining how all the abstraction layers that we have defined in LXSM or LXNM or the attachment circuit of the service attachment points are intending to work together as a system. So we have drafts and we have YANGs and we have APIs available, but and we have an RFC that describes how each layer participates into the service constructions, but know how those are intended to work together as an entire solution. So here, operators do not know which model to choose, how to combine them, or how to responsibly, or how responsibility is divided across the working groups or the different models, producing that an architectural view that maybe ONSEN can own. We want to confirm if this is a recognized gap or this is still a problem for the operators. And also the question is if we elaborate more documents or more architectural drafts, if this will solve the problem or we need something else, right, related with the implementations or open source activities or things like that.
Muthu, Cisco Systems. First of all, I think the authors have done a good job of compiling all the issues. So that's a good thing. One thing I noted was how do you reconcile this with the ACTN architecture? Because ACTN brings in a whole bunch of other abstractions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So is that in the scope of this working group? Or
access circuits is one of the, but I mean, drawing all of these things together is one of the things we need to get a handle on, I think.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Mahesh, Sam, this is more a process level question. Is the architectural document a standalone document that talks about how to use these models, or is it going to be a guiding principle for the other pieces of work, other problem statements that have been defined till now?
If I recall what's in there, there's another document that defines the whole Yang model taxonomy. So the device layer models, network layer models, and service layer models. And then 8696 tries to draw all these things together and say, okay, this is how these are meant to interwork. So yeah, it's not a standalone piece of work, but the feeling for, we've obviously tried this one before, but these problems keep on getting brought back to say, I don't know what to do with it. So the question here is one of, do we have insufficient, is there a problem with 8696? Do we need to take another swing at that? Is the whole approach the wrong approach, or I'm not really sure at this stage. But this is obviously something we have tried to solve previously, and yet the problem persists.
Okay, I mean, it's great if these are additive things that we want to put in the document, but I would imagine that its usefulness would be more if it was tied to actual underlying work that the working group is going to work on.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Italo speaking, replying to the question about there is already a mapping between ACTN and 8309, which is also mapped to ATC, ACT96. So you can easily be mapped. These models can be easily mapped to the ACTN interfaces.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Problem 7, please.
Joe, have any comment? Or
Oh, Joe, sorry, I didn't see you in the queue.
Joe Clark. Yep. Looking at the questions, I think maybe one of the reasons, and it was 8969, that it wasn't effective is maybe the last question: to what extent a given implementation actually supports a full model, and which abstractions to use in which scenarios. One of the things Dhruv and I were collecting or thought of is it doesn't always have to be a document. Yeah. Maybe wiki collections of experience from operators could help make this a little bit more effective. As they learn specific things about specific vendors or interoperability, they can publish that, and that could help answer some of these questions.
I think you're right. On another thing that I think we need to look into is if there are implementations of this is how it's been solved in this particular context. It may be a better approach than another RFC that fails to solve the problem. Okay, number 7, please.
Perfect. Problem number 7 is limited support of dynamic lifecycle management. Here, this is described in section 414 of the document. So basically, it's limited support of dynamic lifecycle management, on-demand service instantiation, dynamic bandwidth adjustment, or temporary service suspension. So all the young definitions that we have right now are defined basically considering target static configurations instead of these dynamic changing environments. So these problems will describe that kind of nature of the existing young models.
Does anyone have any questions as to kind of what the use case behind this requirement is?
Not that, but I have a question as exactly what's meant by this. Is this like ephemeral configuration? Is that what is, or what might be gRibbie might be used for, that sort of thing, or is that something different to be?
The way I understand this is that you may have services which have maybe a prepaid boost that you could have. I have a large data transfer, I send an API call, I flex the bandwidth to whatever I want. When I finish the transfer, I turn it off again. Or maybe you have a situation whereby you have, I do my data transfer at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday morning or something. And so I have a regular 2-hour time slot where I can, get 75 gig or whatever it happens to be.
Okay, and then the next question is this then work for this, for what's happening in ONSEN for a framework, or is this actually work that then someone's going to be redirected into NetMod to say, you need to support protocol operations to do this or something similar?
This is a good question. And, if there is a time-based component that we need to start, a Yang calendar and who knows what around there, is this is it just this, or is it a wider solution? I don't know, but we've talked about both.
Okay, thanks.
Any further comments on this one? Oh, go ahead, please, Chongfeng.
Yes, this problem is one we witnessed in our network when providing some new services. As mentioned in IETF 125, a service called data intensive transmission service. So we need the network needed on-demand service initiation and the dynamic bandwidth adjustment capabilities. So the problem is very clear. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah, and then we'll.
Chris, so yeah, when I saw this sort of problem, I came to the same sort of conclusion as Rob, where maybe this is something that needs to be solved in either NetMod or NetConf, and maybe you sort of need support in the data stores to express temporary or changing intents in various situations or over time. So yeah, I think that is worth exploring.
I have a question on the dynamic nature, right? I would assume that the dynamicity is known to the controller, right? So how different it would be for a controller to make a change on the network and at a certain time, right? So what's new?
It's a good question, and I guess it kind of comes down to what drives that. Is this something that comes from your BSS system to signal it's time to change this? Is it something that happens in the OSS layer and it's dealt with there? Obviously, something has to have this interface and an ability to model that stuff. Where?
I mean, the thing that I'm not able to kind of comprehend is that would that information be in something that exists in the intent, which is kind of outside the model, at least in my mind, or because what the intent states is the what you are going to perform as a target state for the network, right?
Yes.
While the LXNM and LXSM gives you the model for what it needs to be. Are we not mixing the intent action with the model?
Yeah, but you could also argue when the customer takes out a contract with variable bandwidth in there, that is an intent.
Possibly, possibly, but is that the standard L3 service model? I mean, that's
yeah. I think this is something.
Because I think,
the
I
discussion
think maybe
behind
we are taking things that are a problem statement for the intent to problem for a network model, right? And in my mind, they are separate.
Thanks.
Again, Danby, just one comment is that having status in the model to see if the service is up and alive, that's one thing. Like think about their temporary service suspension. Somebody didn't pay his bill, so I have to shut down the service because he didn't pay the bill. Will I keep billing in the model? Because it's something that's completely commercial.
Oh, yeah.
If somebody decides to say, I paid for 100 meg, but for now I want 200 megs. This is a service order, billing, all those things. I need a technician on site. Will I keep the technician availability?
Yeah, I mean, there are
at some point knowing where to stop. I think it's important as well.
Okay, so it's. I think there's more discussion around this one, so we'll take this one to the list. And the final one is number 8. So, Samir, over to you.
Perfect. Problem 8 is lack of templates for common lifecycle patterns. So operators must manually configure every service instance, and these manual configurations reduce the operational efficiency and can lead to or increase the risk of misconfigurations.
Mahesh, I think it's you. Daniel was in from before. So.
Mahesh, so if the intent here is more a template-based configuration, I think there is a draft that was presented today in NetMod. Take a look at it and see if that fulfills this particular requirement.
Okay.
And then I did have a process level question, so I'll wait to make sure that if there's any other discussion of this problem, then I'll come back to the process level question.
Okay, thanks. Any further comments on this one? Oh.
Dhruv, just a confusion whether this includes when the Yang model themselves have some templates inside it, or is this problem that we are describing in a different context? I think that could be clarified a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, can you look to address that in the next version? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just to quickly respond, Chris, as one of the authors, this would have been specific templates that would be part of that particular Yang model is what was intended here by the...
Okay.
So it's more like a guidance to Yang authors to include templates.
That should...
Yeah. Okay, if there are no other questions, I believe there were 2 problem statement drafts in front of the working group. I think, Chung, you are authors of the other one. Has the work group decided what we're going to do with the other document?
What we wanted to do and what we discussed was to roll all of these up into one single new draft. And so I think we've captured everything that you had listed in there, plus the different problem statements from all of the drafts that's and NEMOPS and really all of the other sources that we had.
Okay.
That was the aim with this one, and just to start with a fresh document that combined all of these things.
Great.
Okay.
Sorry, Chris from Huawei. Just, I think I was wondering something similar to Dhruv. I mean, do you want to, when you get into sort of life cycle patterns that can have all kinds of permutations, they're dynamic, sort of under user control, do you try to come up with permutations of models to capture all that, or did he rely on lifecycle negotiation processes around fixed templates to do that, right? I mean, not a model isn't the right way to, a variant of a model is not necessarily the right way to solve every problem. Just a thought.
Fair comment, yeah. Okay, we need to finish that there, but I'd like to move now to use the rest of the time for a shorter than planned open mic session to raise, are there any other problems that you believe we have not currently captured that you think we should be looking to describe at this stage for consideration for the work group?
Yeah, Chongfeng again. And one problem maybe we should consider is about quantum security. Yeah, because right now more and more customers need long-term data confidential securities. To meet these requirements, but the current service model do not support quantum security. I think we should be considered by ONSEN working group. Is that a question?
Okay.
Oh, quantum.
Are there other operators that see a need for quantum configuration as part of the service models?
As far as I know, several operators has deployed such kind of service.
Okay. Thanks.
Benoit, it's not about something missing, but maybe one observation which is somehow linking to what Joe said. I mean, at the beginning, all the problem statements over the problems are real problems. This is for sure. Now, I want to understand, like, I could say yes to everything, and I could add a longer list. But in the end, we have to do something in the working group. So in between all this and finding a solution, I would like to understand, I mean, who is committed to do that? Who wants to do the job? And can we do it? Because there are some of them that are a real problem, but some of them imply, I want to have an open source controller that will give me all the mapping and get the free launch and everything. So in the end, we could be telling all of them are in scope, but I can't picture taking all of these problems to having specific solutions and having everybody happy, because it's going to take a lot of resources to do that. A lot of commitment, and I'm not sure how you want to run that. Maybe it's the wrong question, the wrong time. But
no, I mean, I think there's what we see is broadly some structural and some much wider problems, which are the things that we need to tackle. And I think there's also a backlog of maintenance extensions that need to be added in, and those maintenance extensions may just be, okay, here's a new container and a small augmentation type of thing. But certainly, once we've got this stuff together, we need to triage and see, and some sequencing about how we can approach those things, and what we can do and what we can't.
Very good, because the goal is noble, right? But it's very wide as well.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, one problem that I ran into in this space is basically referencing secrets, like secretive information. So sometimes when you go to the device, at some point you need to say, this is the password, or this is the key for ISIS or something like that, right? So if you go through your orchestration flow, you somehow need a mechanism to reference data that is obfuscated, that somehow is secretive, and that you need to resolve in order to get to the device level. And so I ran into this issue, and I'm not sure whether we have to solve it here.
That was going to be my question.
Okay, I just want to bring up the issue, right? And then where we first of all, do we want to solve it is one, and then where we solve it is a second, right?
Okay.
But yeah, so it would have been nice if Yang could express some referencing capabilities. And yeah, so that's the issue that I see or saw in this space with orchestration. But that doesn't mean we have to solve it here. And first, do we have to solve it?
I mean, I recognize what you're saying, and it's something that everyone has their own solution to, but it feels like maybe more of a netmod problem. But
Chris, comment on Chongfeng, I guess particularly, but in general, I do think we have to be careful about including an ever-expanding amount of parameters in the service model, especially if you're wondering, like, does the customer even need to have an influence on that particular thing? They're meant to be customer-facing models, and maybe in the network levels, models they sort of fit, and you want to be able to express stuff like security. But I think otherwise, if you just deploy it by default for most of your customers, then maybe it doesn't belong in that intent.
Daniele Ceccarelli. So there is one thing that I don't know if it's already covered by the previous problem statements or not. It seems to me that is not, so I wanted to bring this up, which is a problem that we found when deploying mostly service models in the network, which is the lack of possibility to map the abstraction layer to the underlay layer. There is a draft that Dhruv and I worked on in TIS, which was mapping the service layer to the underlay T infrastructure. Okay. But that is extremely T specific. So maybe one thing that could be helpful here is to have something that is a little bit more generic and that does not necessarily provide the capability to map a service to, for example, an SRT policy. Or something like that, something that is more generic and that can be applicable to different cases. This is a problem that we have found deploying controllers in the network. I don't know. I mean, it should be operators to say that. I'm giving voice to the operators that found this problem.
Okay. I think that's the end of our time for that session. So can you move on to the next slides, please? Thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Chris.
Yes.
Well, you can use that, or that's the. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see how that. No. Brute force works. This draft is an extensible architecture for service modeling, and it's really based on a couple of years of experience now implementing the various service models, so L2 service model and L3 service model in a couple of different networking environments and what we've learned from that. In particular, what we're really seeing there is if you look at the Yang, there is actually a significant amount of duplication, like more than 1/3 of either model is containing the exact same Yang nodes trees in the tree. And of course, then there are L2 specific things, L3 specific things, but this is not reusability, right? It's actually duplication. And I think particularly as we here in ONSEN start looking at, hey, we're going to maybe add more use cases, other services than these VPNs, then, well, we're going to end up creating more and more of this duplication if we just keep copying that pattern. So it is really worth looking at, I think. That is just from the Yang perspective, right? So that would sort of make our life hard as we write the models themselves. But this causes a real problem as well for the implementers and the operators ultimately who have operational data based on these models. First of all, the customer's intent is sort of duplicated, right? So if you think of an operator who offers both L2 VPN and L3 VPN on the same orchestrator at the very top, well, if I'm as a customer having a site that contains both of these VPNs or VPN types, I actually need to duplicate the site information across both models. That is fairly annoying. And then it gets sort of worse if I'm actually trying to express relationships between intent between these two things. So very specifically, the models allow you to specify that certain site network accesses have a better placement choices, right? So you sort of want to say this particular site network access in that layer 2 VPN must share or must exactly not share a bearer with that layer 3 VPN. You cannot actually do that in the current models, which is certainly something that should have been possible. Therefore, the proposal is to revise how these models are built around a sort of common core. The idea would be to remove Yang duplication, so no double text that is equivalent in the models, and simultaneously helping the operational issues. And that would give us a very good framework for going forward and then expanding into other areas of service models that I know there is interest in here. Here's a very basic representation of what that could look like. So you might have something like an IETF service Yang model that just contains the very bare setup without even any particular implementation specific. So no technology specific things in there, just we're modeling customer intent, maybe site network accesses as a base premise, but not the technology being used. You might then have extensions or Yang augmentations that do specific technology-specific add-ons for the bearers as a next level, and then maybe from there common things for all types of VPNs, and then you sort of get to an entirely revised IETF L3VPN service model that builds on top of that whole core. My question for the working group is therefore really on the network models. So I've really been looking at the service models for all of this, but if we look at the problem statement, I see, well, at least these three particular statements in there that to me relates directly to, do we also not need to look at the network models at the same time? And do we need a common architecture to define all these sort of Yang models that go into orchestration platforms or domain controllers or whatever you want to call them, not device models?
So, Oscar, go ahead.
Oscar González, Telefónica. So to your first question, if we need to look at the same time, yes, of course. I mean, I think if we work together, it would be much better. And when you put the VPN common, the VPN common precisely when we created the VPN common working at the network models, we also look at having in mind the service model and with the aim that at some point someone would take them also to the service models. Okay, but we didn't have the strength enough at that point to move it to there. So happy to now work in the second version because it's really required.
I mean, I think one consideration here is that if we start pulling on a single thread, then we may find that the work very, very quickly expands around here. But if that's what we need to do, then maybe that's what we have to do. Italo?
I have one question and one comment. For the question, when you speak about technology agnostic, sometimes different people have different understanding. Sometimes technology agnostic means packet technology agnostic, and sometimes it means really technology agnostic, including packets and circuitry. What is your interpretation?
The most abstracted version possible. So I want to, if it's up to me, I would prepare it for any possible technology. Like, what if I wanted to stick optical information into that model, and sort of, I wouldn't make any presumptions about what we would put in further augmentations and additions.
Okay, and the comment on your question, I think, as we said before, an M and SM are providing two different abstractions, so I don't think you can really have a common model between the two. But what I think has been done for the items which are really in common, and some of them we found it in CCAMP also, some are also common to the device. We can create common groupings. There is already an RFC for VPN common. I think it will be much better to have a common grouping that you can use in different places of your Yang model when there is a clear mapping, rather than trying to merge two models that have a completely different abstraction level.
Just to clarify, I don't think I'm arguing for a common module, as in Yang module for, say, service and network. I would argue for a common architecture of how we do these things. Reusable,
I see. Okay.
Reusable groupings, maybe, as were already brought up.
I see. You mean a same approach for layer 2, for SM and NM, where you have a core and technology-specific augmentation?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand your point. Thank you.
Solution, yeah.
Right, Mahesh, if you could go back to slide number 5, I think. The diagram that you had. Yes. Yep. I've always believed that this to be true, right? A customer ordering a service doesn't care whether it's packets, it is pigeons carrying bits of data, or anything else. I think what they probably at best will say, I want a service between these endpoints. And by the way, that's the quality of that service needs to be defined by a certain set of parameters. And that's it. I don't think so customers want to get into, no, I want MPLS over SRv6, or I want SRv6 native. They probably don't care, provided the data is being serviced across the network.
I think in the general case, you're right. We do have some customers who are very, very prescriptive about how something will be built. But I think the general case is correct there.
Rob Wilson, can you go to the next slide, please? So I think you asked, is the final one. So I would say, I think you should definitely look at this and have a look and see what the solution looks like or what the solution is shaping out towards. And then depending on that outcome, then decide whether it's a good thing to do or not. Because it's going to be impactful, I think, because it's going to break the different models. And I don't think now ahead you can know what that impact is going to be and hence whether it's worth paying that cost. So I would, do some investigation. And if it is good, then go that way. If it's not, it's like hands off.
Right, so investigate without a commitment that that's actually what we're going to do.
Exactly.
Kent Watson. I'm one of the co-authors of the Yang configuration templates document in the NetMod working group. If we use common groupings, then that would be something that could be templatized, so it could be applied to the different places in the various service trees.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Oscar, I think you're next, aren't you?
Thank you. Oscar González, Telefónica. So right now, after the looking at the customer service Yang models, here the work that we are going to present is this update or proposed update of the network Yang models. Even the authors of this are Samir and me. It has all what we are presenting comes from the repository that we set up and people that implemented the models. Can I click here? Pass me the slide. That work in the implementing these models in the last years, they have reported the issues of the implementation. Okay, so here this is not just Samir and me. Okay, perfect. So first, I'll clarify the scope that we have today. Okay, that and what is not in scope is especially is more even more important. Okay, I'm not saying that what is not in scope that it might be in scope someday. Okay, but this is what we have compiled from the issues from what people said. Okay, so here we are talking about missing functionalities. Hey, you have because just to put into context, the network service model is how an operator would like to deploy a service in their network, but being in a point that is vendor agnostic enough, so from it you can derive the device configurations, but it is not abstracted enough as the customer service. So all the everything that you need to look in your inventory, etc., you do it in this layer. When you come down here, you have already taken the decision, you have already taken your choices. So here, there are some functionalities that when you say, hey, I want to create the services, there are some functions that you miss them. Some configuration blocks that are directly passing down that were not there or aligned what you could do in the devices. Some operational issues that we will see. So here, everything that is in scope. What is not in scope? Here. No mapping between models. No, we are not doing mapping. Mapping to device, also not doing mapping to device. All the workflows. Also, when we deploy the models, we saw that in order to really activate a service, you need to do pre-checks. So it's before you do the service, hey, there are some things that you need to look if they're in place. After you have created, you do post-checks. You do some tests. Also, this is right now, this is not in scope. I'm not saying that it will be in scope. Sometimes some would say, okay, but it's part of your service, right? Yeah. But right now, we leave them up. But we know when we need to orchestrate and we did the workflow to orchestrate everything, and that workflows are very particular. Even I work in Telefónica Global with several operations, and every operation did a different workflow. Okay, so okay, I don't care, but they all use the same network model. Okay, so that is the spirit. So here, you can find in the draft, and also you can find in the repository. This has a set of enhancements that people proposed and that we have already been working with them to give or to extend the YANG for it. So, for example, some BFD parameterization, some extension to the VLAN in the tag interfaces, some BGP or pointers to the ACLs, supporting SRv6, which now, again, when we did this several years ago, still we did not have SRv6. So now it's just a stupid thing. It's a leaf that you need to add. But without that, you cannot specify, hey, I want my BRF or that to be deployed using a SRv6 or dual. Okay, and now this is something that we have had to extend. Support for the multicast, inter-AES. So here, L2NM, same thing. We had set of compile. I'm not gonna enter into the technical details of all of them. I think it's relevant. People, they are claimed and people found a solution. Okay, so people extended the model already to find it. So here is just adding them to the drafts. So just take a look at them. I think this part is more interesting. Some people express that, what about the status of the intended network service? So are we using the model just as a one shot? So, okay, hey, this is my intended. So the operator said, okay, after doing your customer service, hey, this is how the service would look like. Send it, footprint, okay, it's deployed, I'm done. First, we use it like that. But then people say, hey, I mean, I have the model, so I want to really know if the network, if the service is running on the network. Okay, you have some operation, some list that says status, or okay, not okay. So is it, how can you say, hey, it is working good? Can you send notifications to say, hey, we are partially down, we are not? So people said, okay, can we use this? So here people said, okay, clarify the status of what does it mean, the operation, really the operational status. In some controllers, the operational status, that means that everything is configured as it should be configured. Just that. And in some cases, it means, well, everything is configured as it should be configured, but something is failing there, so your service is failing, but everything is configured good. So we don't know to which the two we are referring when we say the state is down, okay, or the state is not good. So here we will need some clarification. So here the thing is, does the network model need to take care of this life cycle of the service? So keep on being alive and receiving notification also from the telemetry from the network and reporting if it's okay, now I'm good, now I'm not good, I am good, now I am not good. Now there are separate documents and there are separate YANG models that take care, for example, of the performance monitoring. There is a VPN, you remember we did it in OPSA, I think, the VPN performance monitoring. So it's a completely separate model for that. Also, Benoit created all the assurance tree. So we also have a separate assurance tree for that. So all that pieces, they are outside. So at some point, it's interesting them to have them together or bundle or glued with the network model. Well, it's something. So looking at all the issues, we found that some things were common to all the models. That new technologies, for example, the SRv6 was an example. Incomplete support. There were some technologies that were complicated, so we needed to add the support. And also, we saw that there are more network models that are needed. So, for example, some network level access control list that people from the security can update, routing policy. So there are more network models that are required. So here, what we want is people to work and to send more feedback on this engagement that we are required for the network model and helping the prioritization. We have a lot and we need to prioritize. Try to at least have an agreement on the operational status and how far do you want to go beyond that. So I would like to have an agreement first before moving. Use the repository, the GitHub LXM repository that I hope that we can move to ONSEN soon. And align with the customer service model that you presented before to ensure all the consistency. And here, use this to scope the work in ONSEN. So, time for questions and else.
Yeah, I have a clarifying question, please. If you go back to the one on the state. This one. So, is the requirement from a state is to state what is the the status of the network, whether it's operational up or down, or are you asking whether the deployment succeeded or failed?
Precisely, the question was to clarify what are the different operational status branches in a network service model mean. Okay, so it's precisely pointing out to the two things that you mentioned. Clarify. Say, well, it really this leaf means that the configuration is correct in the device. It is well configured or not. It is looking at the network and something is wrong. So give that clarification, and so that it doesn't matter. I have 2-3 implementations. I know that what they are going to say means something, because right now is operational status is just a small description in the YANG that.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yep, thanks.
Joe Clark, at the risk of sounding weird, I think you have a Yang next kind of problem here. I really liked this presentation. I liked the concrete things that you say we need. I would hate those to be held up for some of the broader changes, but I think listening to Chris's presentation, you've got an opportunity now maybe you're going to need to BIS this work, the LXNM and SM, see what you can do to make it more extensible, but work fast, because operators clearly need some very concrete things to do better with this.
I had a couple of questions on the draft, mostly around kind of what you see the scope of this. The draft's called an update to the service and network models. Well, but what you're doing at the moment is really capturing requirements.
Yes, well, and we focus on we want to capture everything, but as we were more in the network models, right, we started with those. I mean, it's
okay. So there's 2 comments to the title, and it's requirements for an update rather than actual proposal for an update.
No, but there was also young model update.
So you do.
Yes, we took care. I think the ones that we were in the GitHub, we had more issues, and I think the ones that we show here are the ones that we already took care of, putting actual young code and so on. There were some pull requests already.
Okay,
but we have much more code that people is sending us.
Yeah, but around you do plan to confine the scope just being the network models in this document.
Exactly. So we wanted to align the scope to say to move fast and to say, hey, we can focus on these ones.
Yeah, okay.
We ship them, so we want to have to work quick without stopping.
Okay, thanks.
Italo Uzi, I have 3 questions. First, about the SR policy mapping, have you looked at the solution in T service mapping in TIS? Because there is already a mapping to.
Yes, but we have not done any new extra mapping for. It's just the service 6 is just telling you that this particular node needs to work in a service 6. So that implies that when you go and download the template, when you go to the node and
it's not the mapping to a specific policy. I understand.
No. But just by that you need to. The configuration is different in every vendor is a little bit different, and without going into a specific SR policy. So just that.
The second question is, when you speak about new technology, are you considering only packets or also other technology like optical for supporting at least layer 2 services?
We were not looking yet, to be honest, at layer 2 services so far.
Okay.
We were working more in packet services, and the case was more, for example, for the service 6 than another thing. That was but something can come.
And the question is about things I keep receiving conflicting inputs. Single domain.
Sorry, we need to cut the line after. It's locked.
It's whether you are supporting also the case where, because in your figure you show only one controller having control of the end-to-end network. Can you use that also when the network is split into multiple controllers and the PR under different controllers, or is not yet in the scope?
We have not yet in the scope.
Clear.
We are assuming a single administrative.
Clear.
Right now, it's like this. not enter into that space.
Thank you. So I think we have Feng Chao next remotely. Can you bring her in, Mithun?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Feng Chao, and I will present the extensions to the young data model L3SM. Our agenda include motivation and use cases, and model gaps and extensions and open issues. We know RFC 8299 defines L3SM and is widely deployed in our operators network, and it delivering a unified customer-facing abstraction for L3 VPN provisioning. But we found some issues. The problem is that the base L3SM requires some extensions. The first reason is that data-intensive transmission service raise some dynamic requirement. And the second reason is that emerging technologies, including SRv6 and quantum security, expose new features to customers. So this draft proposes extensions to L3SM to fill above gaps. I want to turn to, sorry. Maybe I need to go to slide 3, but the screen is at slide 4.
I think there's just some lag there. It's caught up now.
Yeah, maybe we need to wait for a moment to.
We have slide 4 on displayed here. Is that the correct one?
Okay, but on my screen it is there in screen 3. Okay.
It's now gone to slide 5.
Oh. Yeah. How about now? It is slide 4 in.
That's slide 4. Yeah, we have slide 4 here.
Yeah. This is our first use case, data-intensive transmission service. The challenge is that cross-site data transfer volumes range from hundreds of GB to tens of TB. Low-speed VPNs transfer slowly, but higher bandwidth VPNs cost too much. So the core demand for customers is a balance between cost and performance. They need temporary ultra-high bandwidth connections during data transmission tasks. Here is an example about the transfer duration contrast. And here I want to highlight and share the business value for operators, because operators may worry dynamic L3 VPN will disrupt their existing VPN market and impact their income of VPN. But actually, dynamic L3 VPN can multitask underutilized off-peak network resources, because they can attract customers to use off-peak bandwidth resource to barrier dynamic L3 VPN through appropriate pricing strategy, such as off-peak bandwidth is cheap, while on-peak bandwidth is expensive. With this kind of situation, they can also avoid capacity expansion due to this service. I think this is also very important for operators to implement this service. Okay, because maybe many people are confusing about what is dynamic L3 VPN. So here I want to clarify the definition of dynamic L3 VPN. It means dynamic networking or dynamic bandwidth adjustment. A dynamic networking means from low connection to 8 GPS connection. It is just an example. And this kind of service is suitable for customers who require persistent VPN connections. As for dynamic bandwidth adjustment, it means baseline bandwidth to 8 Gbps boost. It is suitable for customers who require persistent VPN connections for regular use. These two figures illustrate the traffic curve. And to conclude, both this kind of service provide similar temporary high bandwidth capacity, but the service logic actually differs significantly because the implementation is actually different from our practice operating. Here we gave gaps and extensions for use case 1. RFC 8299 only support static VPNs, and RFC 9834 enables flexible AC banding, but lacks support for diverse dynamic provisioning. So our extensions focus on the provisioning of dynamic features. We add nodes to distinguish persistent and temporary connections, and we add nodes to specify the time slot for elastic service ordering. And for bandwidth adjustment, we add nodes to distinguish baseline bandwidth and temporary higher bandwidth. And this is our second use case, emerging tech-driven value-added service. From the customer's side, they need traffic isolation to guarantee their performance assurance for wide area RDMA training or power grid such sort of customers. And they also need post-quantum encryption to mitigate quantum computing risks. And they need end-to-end performance monitoring for fast fault detections. For operators, here I want to also share the business value for them. Operators can offer new VS services when customer ordering L3 VPN services, so they can generate additional revenue. And this kind of services can also make them have better market performance. The gap is that RFC 8499 predates the maturity of SRv6 and post-quantum crypto, so they lack native support for them. And network slicing and PM models are defined in other documents, so without native alignment to L3SM. So we proposed 3 extensions. First is enhanced queues to integration of slicing, and the second is enhanced security with integration of quantum security. And the third is performance monitoring with the integration of PM metrics and configurable monitoring parameters. So here we raise open issues. We have proposed 5 extension requirements as follows, and we welcome your feedback on these proposals. Yeah. That's all. Thank you.
A couple of questions that I had when I read through the drafts in the presentation. Have you checked the work that's going on in TEAS at the moment regarding network slicing? There's a Yang model that's quite advanced there. Have you checked that in line with, I forget which one of your extensions that one was. I think it's extension 3 that comes under. And likewise, have you checked RFC 9417, the service architecture for intent-based networks regarding extension 5?
RFC 9417. I haven't checked that. Maybe I needed to.
Yeah, it would be good if you could have a look through that and see if that has any bearing on particularly on extension 5, and likewise the work in TEAS for extension 3 around the network slicing Yang module that has been defined there.
Okay. Actually, I know that they have defined networking slicing, but I think network slicing is a VS service for operators to deliver the L3 VPN. And I also found that there is some you know, the naming is not the same. So from the operator's perspective, I think it is hard to combine the NSSM to L3SM.
Okay, so it sounds like it might be something that we need to look at in the wider models. Okay, we need to finish there. So thank you very much. And can we have the next presenter, please? It's you, Chris. Sorry.
Surprise.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you. So this draft is about mapping Yang schemas and their instance data to the TMF data models and their APIs. I'm glad to see all the support, encouragement here half an hour ago. It was very cool that there is a lot of operators who clearly have these needs. So couldn't be more timely, or maybe a few years late, nonetheless. Also already heard during that discussion is sort of operators have different views as to where exactly the TMF space or framework sort of stops in your network and where Yang picks up, or I've drawn it here in this visual representation of that problem space as TMF flowing from the top down, that I feel like they sort of start very close to the customer, actual products and bundling of those sort of things. And then that sort of goes down into services and resources. And on the other hand, I think here in the Yang world, we tended to start on the devices and have been modeling up, if you will, into networks and services. And there is, well, a gray zone, I've literally made it gray, of what you do exactly. I don't think for the discussion of this mapping that necessarily matters. That is up to you, I think, as an operator, where you draw the line. But somewhere around there, I hope you will roughly agree. What is, I think, universally agreed is that that border, and I think it's almost a wall, between the TMF's framework and the Yang world, we have big issues, right? So as soon as you break out of this modeled world, you end up with custom adaptions, you end up with middleware, you end up with two worlds which must interact, models move on the Yang end, and then, well, you need to constantly update your adapters to get that mapped into your product's lifecycle on the TMF end. That's a problem. And so a model-to-model mapping is a really good idea. It would enable TMF clients, I will call them, to consume Yang modeled services from whether you call that a domain controller or an orchestrator is up to you, without any need for custom development, right? You would sort of be able to expose Yang models up into what TMF understands as a catalog of services. We will also be defining the service semantics of how you consume those things so that, yeah, it becomes a system that doesn't require maintenance over time. I heard great skepticism also half an hour ago about, well, who would be willing to do all that sort of stuff? We looked at it and, well, it's a lot of work, and I have some great news for you. We've already done it. This exists. The draft explains, well, not for all of RC 7950, I'm not going to claim that, but for a good portion of the current Yang schemas, maybe not any data, that sort of stuff, but for anything that you would reasonably use in many of our service models, it's already defined in the draft as how you could map that into the TMF world, and it's already implemented. Websites on the slides, we have an orchestrator called Stratoweave that's open source. The draft is implemented there completely, I think. This works for a good set of Yang modules that we define here that are part of ONSEN these days. So the L3 VPN service model is entirely mappable and therefore orderable through that implementation. More work is, I'm sure, necessary to look at other things. And we will, of course, keep the implementation up to date as we go through the process here and get that to a standard. On some things that I have received as feedback on the list around Shenzhen time, I think is, well, actually I want to thank Brad and Vance here. They've provided very insightful feedback on the first version of the draft. First of all, around that drawing of how these systems fit together. In the next revision, I'll definitely do a better job at trying to describe that. The TMF is not really my home. I'm more here in the IETF space. But so they provided some very good insights as to what the business side looks like. And they've also provided an answer to a question I had in the draft, which is how do you map complex nesting of lists and containers into the TMF data model correctly, and they've pointed me in the right direction there. So yeah, thanks again. Finishing with the questions for the working group. First of all, a call for co-authors. We do have some other people at Entwine who have been authoring on this as well, or have been thinking about it, and they'll be part of the co-authors going forward. But I'm looking for a broader set of people who might be interested in this work and willing to implement it, so on and so forth. The other question I have is around the TMF liaison statement, possibly. So the way the draft is written, I don't think we necessarily need the TMF to cooperate on here, but I think it's nonetheless a very good idea that they, if willing, have input, right? So I'm sure they have users and other things. So question to that, Chair.
If I can talk on that one, yeah, I spoke to the liaison office yesterday to kind of discuss the process, and we will be doing something in that area, but we'll need to shape what exactly we're doing, whether this is a for your information or a call for action. It's we'll need to discuss what we think we want to see from them on that one.
And just to finish, what I would love even most is interoperability testing, the hackathons, especially if you can bring a consumer site, a TMF site. I'm personally very interested in that to see if interoperability actually works. Right now, I'm just using, a REST client. So,
Wim.
Yeah, thanks for the work. I've done something similar, right? But what I see is that if you go for the full Yang, let's say, schematics, it becomes very difficult. Like if you look to all the Yang definitions and mapping that to the Open API, because that's actually what you're doing here, it becomes extremely difficult because some of the validation rules, there is some of these things doesn't really exist in Open API by default, right? So I feel we can do the same thing in a much easier way by just, if we can map in TM Forum the schema reference of Yang and you use all the Yang tooling as is, by which case we don't have to do any mapping. And I feel that it's if you look at all the different combinations and permutations we might have to do, it might be an easier way to solve this problem. But that's my personal view. And I can write a draft, or I can either comment or we can collaborate on this. But I see two approaches. Either you map two worlds, and the challenge is to map all these permutations. And I know that in OpenAPI you have restrictions and you can do extensions and all that stuff, but it's very difficult to get that aligned. And I think we can basically say if we can have one world talk to the other world, because that's what we want actually to achieve, and just use the tooling as is, it might be a simpler way to solve it. But that's my personal view.
Yeah, comment on that. So I think in the what is special here is this is not just an open API mapping, right? So the TMF describes schemas inside of their systems. Like it's a schema discovery system. So you'd have to, for them to be able to consume it without, again, more middleware, more specific things, you can't just do that. So if you wanted TMF to just adopt open APIs, you'd actually need to go there and get them to build stuff. I don't.
Yeah, you have to extend somewhere, right? So the question is where. So you need somewhere either to reference. Either in IETF we say here's an encapsulation that basically refers to Yang, and then you do the Yang capabilities, or you do it in TMF. So you can do it either way, in my view, right?
This is the purpose of the liaison. I think what we want to get out from this is, can we collaborate on coming up with the best solution, or do we need to solve it here, or are you going to solve it there? But
there's two ways to solve it, right?
Yes,
There's
yeah,
doing a
there is,
liaison
but-
with what Chris is presenting. There's another. I think we could have other proposals on how to solve the same problem.
Sure, but only one can we do within.
Yeah,
the
we have to
bounds.
coordinate.
That's,
I
that's
agree
the
with
core,
that.
yeah, that's the purpose of the liaison.
Daniele Ceccarelli, Francisco. So I wanted to make a comment which is related to the third question, but since I'm here, I'll answer all of them. So call for authors, absolutely not. Thanks a lot for doing this job. It's extremely useful, but extremely boring. So kudos for doing it. TM Forum Liaison, we have two ways of doing it. The first one is, this is our mapping, please review it, which is, let me say, the basic level. And we don't get much from it. I mean, at least a review and acknowledgement could be fine. But identifying the things that where we are not sure and we believe that they could change to, let me say, find a common path, that would be great. And then for how do you see this being implemented? So we have the lowest part of the upper layer of the OSS layer, which implements TMF interfaces. The upper part of the network layer, let's say, for example, the ACTN MDC, which implements YANG interfaces. So do you foresee another layer there? Who is going to build that? The vendors, the vendors that comes from north, the vendor that comes from south, the operator does the implementation itself? How do you see it?
The orchestrator or domain controller, whatever you want to call it, that is the upmost one that has YANG, right? So the way this draft is written, that one can basically point to a YANG model. You include an augmentation. Well, it's an extension. You include a YANG extension onto a particular model, say L3VPN service model. It's generic, right? It can be any model. You basically say that becomes a TMF service, that there becomes a TMF resource, and the implementation there can then basically start speaking TMF interfaces north of itself.
Okay, so I'm that guy. So you're telling me, please implement the TMF interface using this mapping between your YANG and the TMF.
If you are working on an orchestrator that is YANG and currently has netconf, restconf on its northbound, then yes, you're the guy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can I ask you to keep it brief, just in the interest of time, please? Sorry.
We have the privilege of having the IAB chair here, so I'm going to ask him. I looked at the list of liaisons arrangements that we have, and TM Forum is not on that list.
Yes, I can clarify. You don't need a liaison manager to send a liaison statement. And our aim is first to figure out within this group what is the message that we want to send. When we were putting the milestone, my assumption was that the first message would be just notifying that ONSEN, this is our charter. This is what we are saying. This is the wording for TMF that we have specifically put in our charter. So just be aware that this work is happening, and getting that input from them early on would be more useful. And then would be once we have something adopted and once we have something that's a document specific liaison that we could send maybe something in future. Okay. So I think my first reaction would be that let's let them know that we are doing some work here. Yeah, contact me, we'll find out for you. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. David, and no, okay. Thanks very much, Chris. Can we move on to the next presentation, which I think is Linda?
Okay, here a little bit change of the flow, giving a use case and showing how existing YANG models being developed by IETF can be used for this use case. And the goal of this is to see that the YANG models developed by IETF is enough, or if there's something new we need to have. That was the goal. So the motivation, actually, this is really the use case. It's about edge data center hosting AI-related functions or agent. And many of them have very predictable traffic. So since they are like inference application or the module exchange parameters, or database sync. The cloud orchestrator is aware of when the traffic is going to be up and when the traffic is going to be down. So instead of having the permanent connection, they need dynamic change. And when some traffic comes up, especially parameter exchange, there's a very strict latency requirement. So with the network itself having built for general purpose, for other traffic, they need some way to prioritize those traffic and make other traffic maybe stop, or maybe giving them very little available bandwidth. So here are some common characteristics. Very high bandwidth and very strict latency, and is scheduled in advance, and the limitation is limited. The duration is limited. So that what I need is, like for example, cloud orchestration may be able to request from 2 to 2:30 at a certain date. I need to provide this much gigabits between those 3 edge sites. And this really to motivate having some kind of time-scoped unequal paths policy activation. Here's some example. You have edge data center A, and through the attachment circuit to connect to the PE, and then PE to PE through backbone. There are quite a few YAM models being defined already, and each of the PE has their own attachment circuit to connect to their edge data center. So the cloud manager could request, like, I want start time, I want duration, giving the bandwidth, latency, and participating sites, sending this to the network controller. Network controller can configure the attachment circuit. They can make changes to the PE to PE SR policy, assuming the backbone is SR based, and giving the policy and giving the QS. So here we are really just consider overall service, like from service perspective. Okay, so here are the existing YAM models. IETF has developed many YAM models. So here are some of the YAM models need to be used for this purpose. And this draft itself doesn't define any YAM models. We're basically showing an example and how do we use those YAM models for the services. So here's just the sequence of the policy workflow. First of all, you have to identify where are the edge sites. Second step is selecting the participating sites. And then third is sending the request to the network controller. And then controller can install the policy and remove those policy when time expires. Here are some of the gaps through this workflow exercise, I should say. So basically, it needs explicit activation and deactivation times, and policy life cycles need support for scheduled activation and expiration, and be able to roll back. And also need some kind of API, standardized API for the cloud orchestration to send it to the network controller. So this needs multiple YAM models developed by IETF, from AC to TE to SR and QS. Okay, so basically this just reiterate what have been said. So this definitely to demonstrate the applicability of existing work and identify some gaps. And the question is, for this working group, has the identified gaps representative of of the work of the edge-to-edge deployment. Maybe we missed some of the young models which are already developed to suit this purpose. We would love to have your input on that. And should the time-scoped network services configuration being added to the existing model. So we're looking for collaborations and co-authors as well. Thank you. Any questions? No? Then I save some time for your
Thank you very
next
much.
one. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. And finally, I think, is it Louis who's presenting? Oh, you're here. Excellent.
Thank you. So, yeah, I will go a little bit in the direction that Linda was presenting before. So through this idea of working on abstraction for telco cloud scenarios. So the point is that the telco cloud scenarios where we will interconnect basically different computing capabilities distributed across the big data centers, small data centers, sites, and so it's not just cloud plus connectivity. So we need essentially to provide the necessary information for doing the proper cooperation and combined optimization of resources in both cloud and network. So today, essentially, the orchestration relies on fragmenting domains. On one hand, the cloud side, on the other hand, the network side. They are independent, but they are interdependent. So basically, the idea here would be to work on mechanisms for facilitating that interdependency of both domains. So the present mode of operation, as said before, so the both environments are working independently. So there is a fragmented resource visibility. So basically the decisions are taken independently. There is limited cross-domain optimization capabilities. So because of the lack of information, essentially the decisions are taken only with a partial view of the problem, not with the overall problem. There are problems for scenarios like scalability, scale out, and so. And essentially, in the counterpart as well, because of that fragmentation, we avoid the risk of too much exposure of information. If we were to a more integrated view, we need to take care of this risk of overexposure of implementation in the sense of topology data and so on and so far. So this is the present mode of operation. What we would like to explore is mechanisms for facilitating that future mode of operation that will be a more combined work between the cloud and the network. So for that, what we are proposing is some idea of abstraction function. Talking with Oscar, well, in the draft you will see the figure. Only state service orchestrator. Talking with Oscar probably will be more precise to refer to cloud service orchestrator. That would be the entity that would manage basically the workloads, where the workloads will be placed, and so taking into account the different constraints. And the idea here of this abstraction function that would collect information from different sources would be to provide the necessary abstractions for aspects like connectivity capabilities in terms of capacity, constraints, latency, etc. Compute and storage capabilities that, of course, will not be directly coming from the network side. The network side would need to interact with the cloud for understanding what are the resources that are attached to different points of the network. And other capabilities that could be acceleration, cloud capabilities, resources, etc. So this abstraction function could somehow homogenize all this information and basically provide the valuable thing for the service orchestrator to do the proper life cycle of the telco cloud service, which is the provisioning, the assurance, and later on the decommissioning of resources once the service has finished. So as said, the important thing to take into account are the security and operational considerations, because we are basically handling with different administrative domains in let's say the typical case. Otherwise, I mean, there will be also a possibility of the telco be the owner of the cloud, but thinking on the big picture, we need to take care of the security and operational considerations. So how to control the level of information that is exposed to the other domain, how to do the authorization of the authentication, the trust boundaries, and so on and so far. The multi-tenancy isolation, and also how to make all these telco cloud services coexist with the services that are already running in the telco network that could come from residential services, mobile service, etc. So going to the final part, so basically the message is that we consider that the telco cloud could require these combined cloud plus network decisions, that abstractions could serve for that purpose. And basically our next step would be to keep working on clarifying what would be the abstraction dimensions to be taken into account, and align, of course, with the ONSEN problem statement. And yeah, for today, maybe to check if this could be of interest for the working group. There were previous discussions in the mailing list a long time ago, but just to confirm if this is of interest or not. Thank you.
Chris, I read the draft and thanks for the presentation. I think overall the problem space is pretty clear to me. I like where that's going. I think where the data is coming from is also pretty clear to me. But what is not so clear to me is what the abstraction layer is. Like it's a 0-0 draft and that's fine. But it's sort of, is it a config false Yang model, or are you building an entire new IT ecosystem?
It's a 0-0 draft, so the approach would be just to let's say, not presume any kind of solution or whatever, just to consider something very high level. Probably could be part of the, well, what is in my mind, basically would be something part of the network controller or network orchestrator. So basically a component that aggregates all that information and provide the necessary information to the cloud manager. And also this component being interacting with the cloud manager as well for collecting information from the cloud side. So what are the resources that are in location A, B, C, and D, and then aggregating that with the topological view and offering somehow an abstracted view coming back to the cloud manager for taking decisions. But this is my personal view at this stage. We, on purpose, left that kind of high level by now.
Okay, understand. Just one clarifying question. Maybe there is, it's not necessarily a passive inventory, you think. There might be use cases for the cloud orchestration thing to interact with this layer and request it to do stuff.
Of course. For instance, the scale across a scenario where the cloud requires to move workloads or instantiate workloads in another point, that decision would be based on this and the information provided by this abstraction function. But again, the cloud need to ensure that the connectivity up to that point would have the sufficient capacity, etc., etc. So there will be some interactions for the different phases: provisioning, assurance, and decommissioning. So I would foresee that interaction. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Italo Busi. I think it's a very important work item. I wonder whether there is a relationship with CATS. How you have evaluated that?
Yeah. CATS essentially works on the steering part, which means that all the instances have been already deployed, instantiated, and so on and so far. So this would be kind of an overarching thing where the steering could be solved by CATS or not. Maybe a case could be network slicing, so no CATS at all. So CATS could be a potential solution for the steering part.
Realization, okay.
But it's yet provisioning, assurance, and decommissioning the other parts that are not covered.
One of the reoccurring things that has come up in us discussions around this working group is, would we need a data center service model or something that we could actually model kind of data center services, data center networking? Do you think that what you're kind of, this is one of the things that this could lead to?
This would not enter on the internals of the data center. So my quick answer would be no necessary. So we are considering here these abstractions to provide, let's say, the connectivity between PEs, or data center gateways.
Okay.
And basically the service that would come from the data center would be, I would say, a normal service. Only have wouldn't, from the first service perspective, at the time of provisioning and providing the assurance and so on. Something specific for this would be that we provide the information to the data center for do the placement of the workloads. But thinking on connectivity, I would say it's a conventional connectivity service, no more than that.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Chongfeng, yeah, I think this work is very consistent to what we have done in our network, because when we operate network, we also operate the cloud. So we provide the service to our customer. We need a unified model, which includes not only connection features, but also computing features. So I think this work is valuable. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Roberto Manzotti from Cisco. I think it's very interesting the orchestration of the data center and with the network. We have another pair of drafts that are under discussion in the SICAM working group related to the same object for the optical networking. So I wonder if it could make sense to, let's say, look at the problem in a more holistic way. So try to look at it not only for packet and optics and have it a comprehensive view of the same.
Okay, thanks, Roberto. Well, of course, yes. Thank you.
And I think we've just about got time for Can. If you'd like to come to the mic. Sorry. Oh, remote. Okay.
Oh, thank you. As I type in the chat box, the service introduction requirements in the Tide Cloud should be 4 dimensioned. I mean, I supposed to add 2 dimensions, additional dimensions to the abstraction, the resource cost and the computing electricity coordination. And I have already given a detailed explanation in the mailing list. And also in the chat box, I just give my opinion that cost or revenue can influence the network solution selection. So one dedicated service model.
Sorry, Can, we're out of time now. So you said you'd already posted to this list. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for this. And we'll see you in San Francisco.
Thank you very much.